We all know when a superhero dies that they will inevitably return to us once more. But how long will this take? When will it happen? Is it possible that this time they'll stay dead for good? Probably not. But still, give us a good story and we will feel the weight of their loss. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. Today we'll be taking a look at some of the superheroes in comics who have died so many times that it has gotten hard for us to take their dying seriously, and resist the urge to react with a dismissive eye roll, as we count down the top 10 superheroes who have died the most. And be sure to stick around to the end of this list where I will have some bonus content coming your way. Alright, let's get counting, and get counting some deaths. Number 10, Punisher. The Punisher's main death came at the hands of Daken, who managed to slice up Frank Castle and decapitate him. Being that the Punisher is just a normal guy, wouldn't think that he'd manage to come back from that. But he did. He later is resurrected by Morbius and the Legion of Monsters, and becomes Frankencastle for a time before eventually being restored to his normal human self. In alternate universes, Frank has even become, in a sense, his own enemy, taking his own life, like when he took out the entire Marvel universe. Considering how conflicted of a character Frank is, his struggle with depression is pretty understandable. More recently, in 2019's Punisher, he was suspected dead after being shot by Black Widow and falling off the top floor of Fisk Towers. However, it was later revealed that Ghost Rider had saved Castle and that he was still alive. They faked us out. They faked us out there with that one. Number 9, Barry Allen. With time travel, of course, comes a lot of risk, so it's not surprising that many of the Flashes have had to face death multiple times. One of the most famous to sacrifice himself and return is Barry Allen. His most notable death was during Crisis on Infinite Earths, when Barry ran so fast he managed to counteract the antimatter radiating from Anti-Monitor's Doomsday Machine, running so fast that he could actually feel the time stream, and ended up killing himself in order to save everyone. This death was so meaningful and so powerful that we actually allowed Barry to remain dead for over 20 years. But eventually, Barry would return, emerging from the Speed Force, and we'd find out that he never really died fully, just physically kinda died. But of course, that revelation was kind of a retcon. Barry has also had to watch a version of himself die in the End of the Road story, and has had his past self die before the events of Crisis, only to be saved by Wally in the story Chain Lightning. Number 8, Iron Man. And if we're including the number of times that Iron Man faked his death, the amount of times he's died nears the double digits. My favorite of his fake deaths being when he was receiving criticism for going after everyone, villains, superheroes, and government agencies included, who were using his tech. Now, instead of offering an explanation for why he felt he was in the right and explaining his good intentions, Tony Stark created a fake identity known as Randall Pierce and faked this character's death by allowing his red and silver armor to be blown up without him in it during Armor Wars. He then later kind of showed up sounding exactly like that character and being like, yeah, I'm Tony Stark now, it's fine. When it comes to actual deaths, we have his tragic MCU counterpart's death in Endgame, but on the other end, we also have the ridiculous story and subsequent death of Tony in The Crossing, allowing Stark to come back as young Tony Stark. Oh, The Crossing, what a weird time. Number 7, Wolverine. For someone with a healing factor, Wolverine sure dies a lot. He's gone to hell only to come back and take hold of his body again, which at the time was possessed by a demon. He has died side by side with the X-Men countless times in both the main continuity and in alternate universes. Wolverine even got his own Death of miniseries in 2014. Surprisingly, Marvel even allowed him to be dead for a few years before bringing him back finally in 2018, eventually revealing that he had been resurrected by the villainous mutant Persephone. You know you've made it when you get like a Death of comic. Death of Wolverine, Death of Superman. These are the things. Batman RIP. Number 6, SpiderMan. SpiderMan has definitely died more times than his secret civilian identity has been publicly revealed, I think. Honestly, it makes sense why Peter Parker is always so mopey in the comics. He's got a lot to deal with. One of his major issues being not just the safety of his loved ones, but also the safety of his own self. And a lot of his deaths are kind of weird as well. There has been more than one instance where Spider-Man's death has been accompanied by some kind of weird spider-like transformation, sometimes involving a cocoon, and sometimes resulting in him being resurrected with his lost powers returned to him, or improved upon with, gross organic webbing. Not something that any of us really asked for. The crazy thing is that Peter never seems to manage to stay dead. Even when he and Dr. Octopus swapped bodies and Peter's consciousness seemed to die in Otto's failing body, he still managed to somehow return through residual consciousness left in his own body. And then he even came back with a force, kicking Otto out of that body. Woo! Number 5, Superman. DC is a little confusing when it comes to counting deaths, as we have different continuities to consider when talking about their characters. There is New Earth, New 52, and then lots of alternate Earths as well. If we were talking about alternates, then Superman can be considered as dying well over 10 times in those stories. Now, when it comes to main continuity storylines, though, he has died considerably less, more in the realm of the single digits. While many may be familiar with the storyline of the death of Superman, one of my favorite Superman deaths was one that Dr. Light brought about. So Dr. Light managed to hypnotize Clark Kent into using a magic wand referred to as the Satan Staff to kill Superman, aka himself. Dr. Light didn't know Clark Kent was Superman anyways. Fortunately, Batman knows how to operate magic wands and uses the same one to revive his pal Superman. I just love magic wands and the fact that Superman is weak to magic because he needs a weakness. So we had to give him that. Number 4, Captain America. Captain America has died a surprising amount of times, and when he is not busy actually dying, he is likely busy faking his own death to make it look like he did. One of the most heartbreaking deaths for Cap was in Civil War, where a brainwashed Sharon Carter's fateful bullet killed Steve, although Tony took the blame for Cap's death there. Understandably so, too. Tony was the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. at the time, and it was while Steve was in S.H.I.E.L.D. custody that he was assassinated. Even when Bucky Barnes wore the mantle of Captain America during the Fear Itself event, he too died in that role. Captain America's dying left, right, and center. Number 3, Batman. Batman has died likely more times than you can count, if you are including alternate Earth versions of him and stories outside of the main continuity. But even if you aren't including those, he's still died an impressive number of times, and returned an impressive number of times for someone who is known for being, really mortal. He's a pretty mortal guy. He's extraordinary, but he's just a guy. Thank goodness for those Lazarus pits, otherwise we'd lose a lot of characters from the Batverse. How many times alone was Batman killed and resurrected by Emperor Joker as well? My favorite Batman death, though, is in Batman issue 72, when Bruce consumes poison to kill himself just so he can join an exclusive social club reserved for those wealthy elite who have cheated death. Aptly named the Death Cheaters of Gotham City. Batman is clinically dead for 7 minutes before returning to life. I think, though, that should likely mean he came back with little to no brain function. 7 minutes is a long time. Can you be clinically dead for 7 minutes? In a comic book you can for sure, if you're Batman. Number 2, Jean Grey. While not all of her deaths have counted as some were kind of retconned away, Jean is known in the comic book world for being one of the heroes most likely to die, and then most likely to be resurrected. Due to her connection to the Phoenix Force, she usually ends up dead only to be reborn again. Like a phoenix. It has also been demonstrated that Jean is now so powerful that she actually doesn't even need to rely on this connection to return. She can actually bring herself back, no Phoenix Force needed. So although it may seem like she is the most likely to die, it's actually that she is the most likely to survive, as even when Jean is dead, she is never really gone, even reaching out in a residual astral form to tell Scott it's totally cool to hook up and move on with Emma Frost. I'm cool with it. And even if you ignore her most meaningful death in the Dark Phoenix Saga story, which was later kind of retconned, Logan himself was forced to kill Jeannie dozens of times in the X-Men Phoenix Endsong miniseries. Number 1, Doctor Strange. I know what you're thinking, but wait a minute, how could Doctor Strange beat Jean Grey for the number 1 spot? How is this even possible? Doctor Strange can't have died more than maybe a handful of times, if at all, in the comics. And you're right, in the comics. But in the MCU, Doctor Strange has likely died an infinite number of times. He has at least definitely died more times than Jean. I think. Even if we don't count all the deaths he witnessed while looking at alternate timelines in Infinity War, there are still his time loop deaths caused by Dormammu that he lived through at the end of the first Doctor Strange film. Doctor Strange promised himself that he was willing to suffer through those deaths and that loop for as long as it takes, for forever if necessary, until Dormammu changed his mind. And although we only saw 9 of his deaths, this is obviously meant to be a brief montage that could have represented millions and billions of deaths. I mean, I feel like it would have taken Steven a while to break Dormammu. Thank you so much for watching, Nerd Squad. I hope you enjoyed revisiting some of the most famous and non-permanent deaths in the superhero world, and learned about some new super weird but fun deaths. What do you think are some of the most ridiculous deaths within the superhero world? Which comic book death do you feel was the most meaningful? Which superhero do you think has died the most? Which superhero do you think can just never ever die? Let us know in the comments below. And speaking of comments, it's time to turn to some comments from one of our latest videos, Top 10 Scary Green Lantern Alternate Versions, Part 2. Jacob Howell suggests you should do Top 10 Most Devastating Deaths. Well. I tried to include some devastating ones on this list for you all, so hopefully that helps to scratch that itch. Blue Angel comments, I guess I would have to be a Blue Lantern guy, but I'm more the red type these days, smashing things. Shame I can't be a Blue-Red Lantern in the DC Universe game, lol. Maybe not in the DC Universe game, but in the comics, anything is possible. If Harley managed to get her hands on a red and black lantern ring, through eBay pretty much, I'm sure there is a reality where at least a blue and red power ring exists somehow. And that's all the time we have for comments today. Be sure to comment below for a chance to have your thoughts and feels shouted out in a future list. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I'm your host Amanda McKnight, reminding you to stay nerdy, YouTube.